Welcome back to Chats and Recaps. As always, my name is Sammy.
And I'm Mimi.
And today we're doing a recap. Now let's get to recapping. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you never miss an upload.
These are true stories from the HBO docu-series I'll Be Gone in the Dark. The following episode may contain graphic depictions of rape, violence, and sexual assault, which may not be suitable for all listeners. Listening discretion is advised.
If you or anyone you know is a victim of rape, sexual assault, or abuse, please reach out to your local police department or a crisis hotline for support.
All right, and welcome back to another episode. And today we are talking about something different, something that we haven't done yet. And we're both really excited about this new series that we're going to be covering, which is called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. So we're heading into the terrain of true crime documentaries and docu-series, which is something that we are both incredibly intrigued by. And the one that we're going to be going over is a docu-series that they just started on HBO, which is available if you have Hulu with HBO add-on. That's where we've been watching the series, and we're going to start today by going over episode 1. But first, Mimi's going to give a little background about the series and kind of how it came about.
All right, so I'll Be Gone in the Dark what is based on a book that was written by Michelle McNamara. She's a crime writer. She was a teacher in writing. She had a blog called True Crime Stories and also had a podcast. And the reason that I say had is because if anyone knows about Michelle McNamara, she passed away in 2016. Now, her husband was Patton Oswalt. He's known for acting roles, comedy, like in King of Queens. And on April 21st of 2016, her husband, Patton, found her dead in the bedroom of their Los Angeles home. And the autopsy showed that Miss McNamara, who was 46 at the time, had an undiagnosed heart condition. She was also taking some dangerous mix of prescription drugs, including Adderall, the pain narcotic fentanyl, and the anti-anxiety medication Xanax. Now, the book is based on a serial killer that she was really obsessed with. And at the time, he was called the Iran serial killer, which is the East Area
Rapist.
East Area Rapist slash Original Night Stalker. So the book was based on him, who she later called the Golden State Serial Rapist Killer. Now, how she got started with the obsession was one night she put her baby girl to sleep and started researching about the Iran's killer. She found a book called Sudden Terror written by a police detective, Larry Crompton, who retired as a lieutenant. And there he depicts the story of rapist survivals and talked a little bit more about this killer. Now, this is what fascinated her more was this serial killer raped over 50 women and killed 10 of his victims. Well, they think it was 10. It could have been more, but it was 10. And what fascinated her was, here's this man doing all these raping and killings, and nobody knew about him. Nobody knew about him. They didn't know this was going on, and they didn't know he was never caught. And to this day, he still hasn't been caught. So that fascinated us, and we started watching this series, which is on HBO. And again, like Sammy said, is on Hulu, but HBO is also with your cable provider and Amazon Prime. So let's talk a little bit more about the serial killer and other things that she worked on. She was a blogger. She had her podcast. So she did a lot of other stories besides the Iran serial rapist.
Yes, she did. And one of the big things about her that was really emphasized in the beginning was something that she had in her was that she was obviously obsessed with getting justice. It wasn't just obsession over the crimes, which is important to note. She had this desire in her that things like this shouldn't be unnoticed, and that there are connections here and dots that can be connected to figure out who the serial killer is. There's no way that nobody knows anything about this person. And as they dig deeper into the case and other things that she did, that becomes very clear. She was very intrigued by unsolved cases that were not getting a lot of media attention. One of the other ones that they did discuss was one of her first cases that she looked at regarding a missing boy. Did you write the missing boys' names? I didn't get their names.
No, but I think it was Alex.
But basically there were 2 boys that went missing, and she was the only person who really looked at these 2 cases. They were 2 separate cases, and up until she had reviewed and really looked through all the details of either of them, she was like the first person who actually suggested that these 2 cases might be connected and that they may have been done by the same person.
Yeah, in that case, there was a recent kidnapping of a young boy, and he was being posted on the media and such, and that's how she came across the case. That led her to investigate another boy who was missing 5 years before the recent one, who had no media attention at all. And then when she wrote her blog and made her an assumption saying that, you know, these 2 cases were really similar, wouldn't it be something if this was the same person who took these 2 boys? So the police started investigating further, which led them to the house where the kidnapper was. And when they knocked on the door, lo and behold, the boy that answers the door was the one who was missing 5 years before. So she liked to bring a lot of crimes that happen to light that nobody talks about. I don't know how the media chooses which stories to talk about, but every story should be talked about.
Well, they kind of go into it like further on in the series when she was trying to get attention on the case. But they did an interview with her in the initial part of the docu-series where she was talking about like why was she so interested in this case, and it goes they discuss that, then they go back to the primary part of the docu-series is about the Iran killer.
Yes.
And so she, when asked why she was so intrigued by this case and why she was so obsessed with this case, was because it wasn't getting a lot of media attention. And yeah, like you said, you do see that a lot. Like, what makes them decide what cases are worth talking about and which ones aren't? And the fact that you even have to use the word worth, like what's worth talking about versus what's not worth talking about. Everything is worth talking about.
That's right.
Every case is equally worthy of getting media attention.
That's right. At the time, he was a serial rapist.
Yeah.
How did that not get attention? Like,
who turned killer?
It's crazy how he raped 50 women and couldn't be detected. Yet killers like Ted Bundy, the Zodiac killer, the Son of Sam, they all were getting all this attention. And here are these women being raped individually, all in different places, and just getting away with it. It's creepy. It's scary.
They talked about it, and at the time, they weren't wanting to release anything about what was going on because they didn't want to, quote unquote, instill fear into the public about what was happening. And so the sheriff's department didn't really have a lot of information to give out, so they didn't want to talk about it because they didn't have a lot of information. Well, isn't that all the more reason to talk about something? Because there could be people out there that have information.
Exactly.
You know, sometimes you go about living like your everyday life and you notice things here and there, but you don't really pay any mind to them. And then you go and you see on TV or you hear somewhere or someone's talking about a case or something that's happened, and all of a sudden you never know who's listening, that it could ring a bell in their head and go, oh wait, hold on a second. You know what? I did notice this guy who was doing something weird in like this little area and I didn't think anything of it. But now that you are aware of the story, you could be getting a vital, crucial piece of information from someone you couldn't have otherwise obtained without giving it the coverage and letting people hear the story.
That is so true.
And that's something that they go into a little bit later as well.
Yeah. And the thing, she was so obsessed about revealing who this person was to kind of give justice to all these women. She knew his blood type, his penis size, but just never got to know his face.
No.
They had DNA of him, because there was a lot of certain DNAs left behind in the crime scenes.
Which is crazy, the fact that there's like DNA left behind and they still don't know who did it.
But here's the thing though, you can have DNA, you can put it in the system, you can put it in the database, but if you've never had prison time or did anything DNA wise, then they're never going to know who you are. You have to be in the system.
They do talk about a little bit about the serial killer, serial rapist / killer, and how he was. It's clear when they're describing the stories of how he was able to get into these houses that he was a very observant person. This is not somebody who just happened upon these homes or into this neighborhood. This is a man who meticulously studied people to the point that he knew exact schedules. He knew what doors they locked, when they locked them. He knew what windows were open. He knew who was home. He knew when they were home, when they were leaving. Like, this was a very observant person. And so that's what really made him so dangerous. And what made him go so undetected into so many of these homes.
And not only that, he entered their homes before he attacked.
Yes, because
he entered their homes. He would set things up underneath their mattresses, underneath their beds, like rope and things that he's going to be needing for them. And then he would attack. And that's scary to know that he was in the home before he attacked. And from what they said, the ones who weren't attacked were the ones who had different schedules or their schedule changed, because when you have when you have a very repetitive schedule that do the same thing every single day.
It's just repetitive. Like, they do the same thing. Just call it like clockwork. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like they do the same thing every day, and
they have a very scheduled routine.
Yes, when they follow a routine, a really tight routine,
right?
And not to say that you shouldn't be able to follow a routine, because you have a life, you have things to do, but usually that's what makes you a little bit more vulnerable, because people that are watching you will know your schedule within little time.
Yeah.
Like, this is what they do every day. This is the time they drink their coffee. This is the time they're getting dressed. This is the time they leave their home. This is the time they come back. It's scary.
I do listen to a lot of other true crime things and like true crime podcasts and watch things on TV and everything. And I do notice a common thread in a lot of these things is that they tend to go after people who follow routine.
Yep.
So a lot of times, I mean, there's lots of instances where it's just like random and spontaneous and all that. But then there's a lot of cases like this, especially in serial cases, where they are very observant of people who follow routines. And those are the people that they stay on to. Like, okay, so every day they leave at 10. The house is empty from this time to this time. They always lock this door. Maybe they leave this window open or things like that. And so I noticed that's a common thing. And so something about the case and how she went to or looked at things was that she always was like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. To her, it was like, this person can't stay hidden. That's this person's going to be found. So she always went with this like light of justice that guided her through everything that she went through in the case, and everything that she dove into was with the ultimate goal of bringing that justice.
Yeah, that's very true. She just wanted to bring things to the light. She wanted to help. She wanted to make sure that the survivors were getting justice.
This is something that they went over in the series as well, when she was talking about, first of all, yes, technology has changed a lot. There have been so many cases that have been solved from cold cases that happened years ago that they've been able to solve now due to the new technologies that we have, being able to rerun DNA into the system to find people that they couldn't find before. Those ancestry kits that are really popular that people do, that they swab your mouth and everything, and then it tells you like your ancestry line. There have been murders solved using those DNA cases. And not even the DNA of the person who actually committed the crime, but because of the DNA being related in the family, they're able to find the killer. And so it's true. Technology has like advanced so far that we're able to do things we were never able to do before. And on the flip side of also finding people who have committed crimes, they've also been able to eradicate people of crimes that they didn't even commit. So it's really amazing the things that we can do today, and the resources we have available now that weren't available then, like that you can literally post something on the internet in 5 seconds and reach out to so many people. Whereas back in that time, it was what was able to make it to TV, you know, what did they think was worthy to fit in that like 5-minute time slot on TV? Which case are they going to talk about if they wanted to talk about it at all? So we have so many advancements from technology to social media to all these things that let us bring light to situations and get people's stories out there, which is really amazing. And that's something that she was kind of like a pioneer of. She realized all these advances that we had, and hey, we need to use them.
Yeah.
For the greater good.
She used it on her blogs. She used it on her podcast. And that's why I give a lot of credit to people who do these podcasts and blogs about cold cases that can probably help shine light somewhere. Maybe somebody reading it will say, "Hey, a family member of mine or myself, remember that," or I was there.
Yeah,
you know, because back then, not to put anything on the police forces, but back then, police investigations were horrible. Yeah. Maybe 1 out of 10 cops might follow things correctly. Like that lieutenant, Larry Crompton, who kept all those, I mean, everything that he went through, he kept it. He wasn't going to let it die.
There are certain instances in ongoing cases being investigated where there's certain information that they won't release to protect the investigation.
Of course.
Like they don't want to kind of like tip off the person, especially if they're drawing in on a suspect. And they don't want to like tip them off. I know there's certain reasons why they choose to withhold certain information. Well, but at their point, it was stuff that should have been released to the public, and people at least need to be aware of what's going on.
Well, at one point, they didn't want to put anything out there because
they didn't want to cause fear.
They didn't want to cause fear and panic. Right. I'm sorry, but your reason not to cause fear and panic caused more rapes.
Because people could have been more alert.
Yes, they could have been more alert. They could have prevented maybe from things happening. They could have locked their doors. They could have double checked. They could have gotten alarms. They could have done, so many things to prevent.
They did talk about how I know it used to be a big thing, and there were a lot of shows that chose to go over crimes this way when they would like depict crimes on these TV shows. And she was talking about how they would use like the actress and like and the lingerie, and then have and depict, and they're like all focusing on painting this picture of this, of the
but they never
like what happened without the important
or the rapist.
Exactly. It's almost like glorifying the act of what's happening.
Correct. Instead of focusing on the true crime, they focused on the way the actress was laying, the fancy, sexy lingerie. Like if a woman typically lays there waiting for the rapist to come and rape them, So, yeah. And she just wanted to make people clear that that's not true life.
Yeah.
And the thing was that a lot of them were based on true stories.
Yes.
And they still glorified it like it's some sexy thing to be raped. It's
disgusting.
It is. It's very disgusting.
There's a difference between giving personification to a killer and bringing light to a crime to bring justice. There's a big difference. That's why I hate those series that they do where they put like all the light on the serial killer getting to just sit there and talk about and portray themselves however they want to be portrayed. It's like, I'm sorry, you've lost the right to be able to do that. The people we need to be putting the light on, and that's why I like what they're doing in the series, is they're putting the light on the victims and telling their stories than a killer. I mean, in this case, they don't have a killer yet, you said. So
they can't reveal the killer. They said she was pretty close. She didn't get to finish her book. They did find some encrypted notes on her computer on some of the leads that she was going to follow up on before her untimely death. And so her husband and her publisher, they picked up the rest, and they ran with some of the things and finished her book. But I think if she would have still been here, she would have solved that case. I know she would have.
Yeah, she was really smart.
I know she would have. Her heart and soul was in it.
In the beginning, she started obviously by looking into the cases, finding all the information she could. She went from doing that to actually visiting locations where these crimes happened. For example, they showed her going to the beach where a couple was murdered.
Yeah,
on
the
the
serial
beach.
camp killer.
Yeah, and she said that going to the actual location opened up so much more in her mind, and then that's when she started getting obsessed with like the really fine details of knowing the crime scene and really looking at any possible like hints and locations and stuff like that. And to be honest, I mean, she had like the mind of a detective.
Yeah, she did. And not just, she didn't just visit these places. She described every little thing, from how it felt to walk where she was walking to where everything was placed, how hard it was to get to those places. And, you know, she just made you feel like you were walking with her. Like if you read her blogs on some of the stuff that she wrote, it made you feel like you were actually walking with her and seeing all these things. So that's why I got fascinated with her, and I'm glad we're doing this podcast on her. She's awesome.
She's inspiring. She was awesome.
She's very inspiring.
Very inspiring.
Makes me want to, start doing the same thing, look into things and
so she basically, like, she kept upping her ante. She went from going to the locations to, she said she scoured the internet, obviously, for any information she could. She ended up stumbling across message boards, which those do exist. There are lots of message boards out there where people talk about cases and things like that, and you can find a lot of information on message boards that you might not find in other places, because people will post their experiences. They might post things that they've seen or heard or things that they know about the case that you can't find anywhere else. So she really dug into the message boards. She started getting in contact with some of the people who were highly posted on the boards, and there was a topic on the boards about social workers and how people were complaining about them being like some kind of wall between like information and people trying to get information. And so what did she do? She went right to the source. She met with a social worker and grew a very strong friendship with that social worker, who actually would take her around to these places, and they basically put their two brains together to start putting more things together. So she went in and took her throughout Sacramento, which is where all the rapes happened. And she was driving her around the neighborhood and showing her like the locations of where these things happened and everything. And they both pretty much just like sat there like two colleagues going back and forth, exchanging information and thoughts.
And not just that, the social worker also had like all these case files that totaled 4,000 to 5,000 reports there was over 50 cases.
Yes.
And each case had reports, and they all totaled to like 4 to 5K on reports. So she said that's like 4,000 to 5,000 chapters for each of the cases. She got her hands on it. She put it all on a hard drive. She took it with her.
Because they showed the social worker going through the neighborhood. Then they kind of went back to her husband. He was doing his stand-up comedy act, and he was talking about her and kind of how they met and everything. She was there for one of his stand-up acts. He had made a joke about Irish women, and then she kind of joked back with him. And then from there, they went out, and it was just like a cute little story about their relationship.
What got me was when she was walking away, he said, "Hey, you." And she's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Want to go out for some drinks with me?" And she's like, "Sure." And then he was like, "Great, give me your number so I can call you."
That's great.
And then she gave him her number, his name. And that's where the crazy, kooky, romantic storybook comedy started.
Yes. It was cute.
How they were together. They were together 5 years before having their first child, Alice. I don't know why this auto corrected to alive.
Wow.
But her first and true love was writing stories about true crimes.
Yes.
So, I mean, she felt that she was really close to unveiling the Golden State Killer, which she called. And I was reading one of her one of her blogs. When she named him the Golden State Killer, she had so many nasty feedbacks from people in California saying that calling him the Golden State Killer would be like glorifying him and giving him the name of their state. And then she felt like, well, if you look at how he was killing people, how he was raping women and then killing them, and the areas that it was the Golden State.
Yeah.
So she wasn't calling him the Golden State serial killer just to glorify him. She was calling him because of the areas where he was at doing these acts. So
my concern is, why are people more upset with her naming him than they are about the actual story?
Exactly.
Like, shouldn't your anger be on him and bringing it to justice so that, you know?
Well, you know, another thing that I've been reading on, and I've been looking at other documentaries about true crimes, like children being stolen, and this going on for years and years, and how certain states and counties didn't want to put a lot of story out there because they didn't want their state or county to look like it's unsafe.
Right.
Which is crazy. It's crazy. That's why all of these rapists and serial killers and abductors got away with so much and got away with doing so many because they don't want to make their state or their town or their city or whatever look really bad. They want people to feel safe. Well, I'm not gonna feel safe if I don't know what's going on out there. You know?
Don't you think it would make people feel more safe if you were actually like putting the responsible people in jail?
That's why now,
and convicting.
I mean, there's a lot of bad about social media, but there's also a lot of good. Because when they don't want to put it out there, excuse me, because when they don't want to put it out there, someone will.
Exactly.
And they'll start writing about it on social media. Like, this happened. They're not talking about it. So they're giving it the glory. So that's the good thing about social media is if they're not going to write about it, people will.
That's very true. Very true. So that makes me think about how I had read something online where someone said that like the world is so much worse now because they're always like reading all these stories about things that are happening. It's like the world isn't worse than it was. It's just that there is that social media exists now and it makes it so much easier to put every story out there. So it's not that the world is more dangerous. It's just that you have more access to information and to stories and things like that.
That's true. But I mean, I do remember when I was little, we used to leave our front doors unlocked or we would play out, but we always played in bunches anyway. So I guess it would be harder to steal a kid. I don't know. 'Cause even back then they would just steal them right from the group and the kids would see them. And I mean, now they will ask kids like, what did you see? What was going on? Where back then, oh, well, we're not going to ask. It's just a child. They don't remember anything. But I mean, I guess that has changed. There's more people to commit crimes on. So I guess that would make it more popular and more out there.
I don't know about that because when they were talking, they went into Fiona Williams, who was one of the victims, and she was talking about her, like how she met Michelle, the first impression she had off of her, how she liked her, and she was comfortable to talk about the situation. And she said how the Iran's serial rapist / killer was basically like the end of innocence in Sacramento. And I was just like, things are so different back then because they were like, oh, it's the safest city in the world. And just like you were saying, they were like, they leave their doors unlocked and they do this and that and the other. And everybody is just going around and not like caring the world. And I mean, of course, back then, that was a high prime time period where a lot of serial killers were going around. It was pretty common back then. It's just that people weren't aware of it. So it doesn't mean that things were safer back then than they were now. It's just that there was this blissful unawareness of what was going on. And now that there's so much light being brought to things, which is good because it makes people become more safe and become more alert and aware of their surroundings. It was just a different time.
That's true.
And they did talk about that, and Fiona did talk about all of that when she was talking about how things changed in Sacramento because of that happening.
Yeah. Now, the first case of this serial rapist was 6/11 of 1979. And then it continued on to like many years, where it was over 50 cases. And now, mind you, those are the reported ones.
There could be unreported.
There could be so many more that's unreported.
There absolutely
also
could.
that blog that led to those feeds and led to people and led to those feeds also led to a lot of people saying that they got weird phone calls.
Yeah, like the hanging up.
Yes,
calling,
they would get this
up,
call,
calling,
hang up, call, hang up. Now back then there was no like what is this called now? I forgot. Back then they didn't have like star 69. They didn't have call trace.
Right.
They didn't have caller ID. So they didn't know who was doing these calls.
Now, they did also say in the beginning, again, they didn't want to release the information. They didn't want the story to go out to the public because they didn't want to cause fear. After a couple of weeks had passed, they decided they were just going to go ahead and put the information out there anyway. They showed that they had like a town hall meeting where they kind of got everyone together and they were giving them tips on things to do to be secure and safe in their house and stuff like that. Security systems and measures that they can put in place to protect themselves. And for some reason, when I was watching it, I started kind of thinking like how they were, like as they were showing the pieces of the puzzle, I was starting to think things like, oh, the serial killer has like this pattern. They look like they obviously must be somehow a part of this community because of the pattern and the areas of which that they were attacking, the houses that they were targeting. And for some reason, when they were doing the meeting, I was like, he probably could just be sitting right there with all those people listening to them tell you what to do.
Thing.
And now he knows exactly what to look for.
I thought so the for some reason, thing.
That's what I was thinking.
When they did
I was like, wouldn't you want to know what to look out for if they're having a meeting about you and like, you
when they did those town meetings and they were all sitting there and the police officers were explaining like what they can do to stay safe, make sure they lock their doors, make sure they lock their windows, put like bells on the windows. If you hear anything, you know, this is a very serious person, like, and then they would say stuff like, you know, if he got you, the best thing to do is just cooperate so that he won't kill you.
Right.
So, because he was that dangerous. And, I mean, he didn't care if the husband was home, if the husband wasn't home. There was one case where he got in, he threw shoelaces to the victim, told her to tie up her husband. He dragged them into the kitchen, put plates on him, and said, if I hear one plate break, I will kill your wife and then I'll come and kill you. So it was like, you know, he's hearing their wife getting raped. Or one who had her baby next to her and she couldn't kick him or do anything because for fear that he would kill her baby and her. I mean, it's crazy, all these things he did. And yet these were cases that were already done before they became known to the community.
Yeah, that's crazy. They went into Chris Pedretti. She also shared her story as well. And again, it's like every story seems it's almost like you're hearing the same story over and over, but just in different different women, people, different instances, different homes. And some of them were like the social worker said, they were a stone's throw away from each other. Yeah. Like it was the house across the street. It was the house a little bit further down the street. The other house was like 2 blocks away. It was all in a similar area.
Was she the 15-year-old?
Yes, she was 15 years old when it happened.
The youngest victim.
And she really depicted how he was able to just get in there like completely unnoticed. The only thing she heard was like a very like slight sound, but not enough to startle her, just enough for her to ignore it. And then all of a sudden he's standing over her with a knife. It's like terrifying.
Yeah, she was playing the piano.
To all the victims who are telling their stories and sharing it in the docu-series, like it takes a lot of bravery to, first of all, to live through something like that and then to share your story with the world. So if anyone's listening, obviously you have a lot of courage and your voice is powerful.
Yes.
And share your story.
She was only 15, and even today when she was telling that story,
it still affects.
It still affected her to go back there to then tell the story, because as she was telling the story, you can see it in her eyes and in her face how emotional she got, that she actually felt like she was there again.
It would affect anybody.
And come on, she was 15 years old. She was supposed to go to dance. She was sick. Her mother and father already had plans to go to a party because she was supposed to be at a school dance. So she stood home, and she was, I don't know if she was making soup or some tea or something. And then she started playing the piano. She heard the noise. She stopped. She looked around, nothing of it. Started playing the piano again. Next thing you know, she felt someone next to her. He had a knife to her throat and told her to do everything he says, or he's gonna cut her throat open. He put her outside. I mean, she's telling the story. He puts her outside and tells her, I'm going to be watching you every 10 seconds. If you move, I'll kill you. Then he started raping her outside. Then he would take her inside and rape her. Then he would take her back outside. So he repeatedly raped her. Now, not saying that not all of the rapes were bad, but hers was the worst by far before he started killing them.
Yeah, because it was only a few more cases after this, and he actually started murdering his victims. Yes. So that's crazy.
And a lot of them were repeatedly raped. She was repeatedly raped over and over and over. And then he had her doing some sex acts, which not all the victims share exactly those same stories.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't going to go into full detail, and we don't know necessarily if the other victims experienced this or not. They may have experienced equally. I mean, no matter
it doesn't matter
extent,
if it was once,
it's
twice,
terrible,
multiple.
It's awful, no matter in what circumstance it happened to you. But we don't know. There could be things that other people maybe didn't feel comfortable sharing. Yeah. So we don't know that. But obviously, this guy was a monster. It's like he had no conscience. He knew what he was doing. He was calculated. He knew how to control people, how to put fear into people. That's what made him so dangerous in that time. It's like he knew exactly what to say to people and how to make them feel like they were helpless. And I did note that in her story, she did say that he said to her, "I'll be gone in the dark." Yes. Which is the name of the book that she wrote. So I'm wondering, I know there's obviously more episodes to this, and other victims are going to share their stories as well. I wonder if that was like a common thing maybe that he said to people.
I think that was one of the things that he would say to them. Like, by the time anyone knows this, I'm gone in the dark. You're never going to know who I am. You're never going to find me. And I'll come back and do it again. Yeah. That's how he made them feel, which I give them a lot of kudos on, reporting it and telling people, because he made them feel like, I can be back again. Which is crazy. To think that your home is your safe haven. At the end of the day, you get home and you're like, I'm home, I'm safe, I'm sound. It's the place where, you're relaxing, you feel safe from the world outside. And then comes along a person like this and takes away that security from you. And then where do you feel safe? So it takes a lot for these women to get over that. It took a lot for these women to move on with their life. I know I would, because I would never give him that much power. That's for sure. Because being afraid and staying quiet is giving him more power. That's giving any rapist or anyone who does anything to you more power by staying quiet.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the perspective about, your home being your safe place. And then obviously imagine how it feels to have that taken away from you. Yeah. This is why it's so important that we don't let cases go cold, that we don't let stories fade away, that we don't let stories go unheard. Because why should this guy get to go around without light being brought to him? And these victims have to live the rest of their lives with what happened to them. Like, they're going to be affected for the rest of their lives for this. True. Why is it so hard to talk about them and give them the coverage to draw attention to the person who did this so that we don't let them get away. The victim never gets to forget what happened. And the serial killer should never have the right to feel like he can walk the streets without anybody knowing.
That's right. That's very true.
We need to focus on making victims feel safe and killers feel not safe.
Exactly. And by the killer not feeling safe is the more people you tell, the more light there is on it. And remember, light is more powerful than the dark. So if you don't put it out there, you don't give light to it, it will stay in the dark. And what happens with things that are in the dark? You can't see them. You can't see it. It has to be seen. It has to be known, and it has to be shared.
And this is why I think that true crime series are so important, especially ones like this. And there's like so many different podcasts and things out there that do the same thing, that talk about stories and give light to stories that maybe are not getting that coverage, because it's important to bring light to them. And I love listening to them because it gives me more perspective. And there's things that I learned that, especially if it's in your community or it happens in your community in an area that you live in or that you're familiar with, now you have information you didn't have before. You can look for things you didn't look at before. Or, you know, like we kind of said earlier, sometimes people were there. Maybe they knew the person, maybe they knew the situation, maybe they were there at the time, and there's information that they have in the back of their head that just is now being brought back to light, that they're thinking about, that can lead you to finding that person. I don't believe at all that there's any chance that there's any crime that's committed that somebody didn't see, that somebody doesn't know something about. There's always some information out there, no matter how minuscule it seems.
Always.
Every little bit of information matters. I mean, if you really look at a lot of crimes that have been solved, it's amazing to see the amount of people they were able to find guilty of things by the smallest mistakes they made.
Yep.
So you never know how important or crucial information you have could be to solving a crime.
That's right.
And that's why it's so important that more people hear it, because the more people that hear it, the more chances you have of getting it to somebody who knows that information, that missing piece.
And another thing that gets me is, well, I don't want to get involved. I don't want that coming to my door. But if you don't get involved and you don't say anything and you don't help, who's to say it's not still going to come to your door? Look at him. How many women did he not rape? You know, it could still come to your door. Regardless, you're letting him walk around free. I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody out there knows something. This man has to have had family, probably had a life. Who knows? Married with kids. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? He had to be part of the community. He probably
was clearly a part of the community.
Had, like, I mean, if you look at all the files and everything, who knows? He probably had a normal day life and night stalker, killer, rapist at night, you know? Usually they have double lives.
That's the thing. And she mentioned that. She was like, for somebody to do all this and just get away with it, then there must be something alarmingly ordinary about him.
Exactly.
Like, he's incredibly ordinary, or else he would stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. You know, those people that when they come and arrest them and everybody's like,
what?
oh my gosh, why are they arresting Mr. Smith? Like, no offense to any Mr. Smiths out there. Why are they arresting Mr. Smith? And, you know, what could have happened? He's such a good man. He you know, they do barbecues. They invite people home. And then they find out the story. Well, he's a serial rapist killer, or a serial killer. He's been killing, and he's got over 50 or 100 bodies. And then you're thinking, oh my gosh, how many times did I not sit in his backyard? Or how many times have I not talked to him? How many times have I seen him? He goes to our church. He, you know, their kids are in our school. And yet that's probably who he is. He's probably someone like that. And that's why they can't find who it is.
And this was a long time ago as well. So,
exactly.
I mean, he could be an old man now. Who knows?
Exactly.
Then
the pillar of the community. Yeah. And you just never know.
You never know. We get to the end of the episode, and this is where she, was it a detective that she was talking to who had a whole bunch of case files? That was where she had like the 4,000 pages of information.
It was.
And
I think it was I think it was a detective.
Who had the files, and she had like some sort of oath or something that she was not going to.
Yeah, she said
not have them in her possession.
When I did an oath, my oath was to protect these files.
Correct.
And not give them to anyone. She said, I can let you stay here and look over the cases and look over the files, but I can't let you take them. But then there was something that Michelle had that she was like, well, how about this?
They did a
trade.
Said,
I can't even believe that I'm doing this, but how about you let me hold on to that and I'll let you take the cases and then you can give them back to me when you're done. So then it was called the underground transfers of documents. So she got a hold of these documents. She put them all on the disk, on a little hard drive disk, which she took with her. And that's where she had all the cases on. She submerged herself in these cases. Like, she was reading everything from each of these files, from each of these cases. Trying to see if there's patterns, trying to see if there was maybe something that she could see in pictures or in notes and pull things out that maybe other people couldn't. So she was really, really, really submerged into it. And that's where she found that he had that pattern. All the victims pretty much were the same. Pretty much, like, their patterns were kind of the same. He learned everything about them.
Yeah, I mean, that part was pretty evident. What shocked me, though, is there was information that she had found in those files that was not, up to this point at least, unreleased, regarding the fact that he used drainage systems to get around. Drainage systems. Like, who would think? I mean, you're asking, like, how in the world was he getting in and out undetected? It was like unknown that he was using drainage systems. Like, that is a really important fact to know, wouldn't you think?
Yes, it is.
That she would not maybe have ever known had she not made this underground trade of information.
That's right. I mean, if you want to check it out, again, it's on HBO. It's called I'll Be Gone in the Night. I'm sorry, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And when I saw, it's going to be a docu-series, and when I saw it, I don't know, I just got fascinated by her. She's a great writer, and it led me to her blog. It also led me to her podcast, True Crime, a True Crime Diary, and how she writes. I ordered her book, actually. I should be getting it soon. I ordered it off Amazon. It was like $15.96 for a paperback. And then the other book that got her into this whole thing, which was called Sudden Terror. I also downloaded it on my Kindle Unlimited. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. It's also available on paperback for the same price. So if you guys want to read it, I sure am. I'm intrigued. I want to read her book. I want to read what she found, because her book was based on this case. So
it was.
If anybody else want to read out there and they want to share with us any information, or if they've read on her podcast before, if they already read her book and you want to share, make sure to make those comments on YouTube. Leave us a comment wherever you can. Shoot us an email. We would like to hear.
Yeah, we're also available on Apple Podcasts, so you can listen to us, download and listen on Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can also go ahead and rate our podcast there and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And so we really ended off the episode, it looks like, at just the tip of the iceberg. It looks like there's a lot more information and things that are going to come in the next episode. So next week, Tuesday, we're going to be posting an episode going over episode 2. And that will be replacing our usual Bachelor recap content that we have next week. So we're going to be going through this series. And then on Friday, we're going to be posting an episode about a completely different series with a completely different topic and issue that's going on today that we're starting to see justice come for, which is on Jeffrey Epstein. It's a docu-series on Netflix. I'm really interested to see this one because I read a brief description and it said something along the lines of that he had made in 2008 some sort of deal with the government for immunity on the crimes he committed.
Yes.
So I'm really interested to see what information and how everything rolled out with this case.
Yeah, me too.
And we're going to be covering that one next week, Friday. So if there's anything else that you want to hear us discuss, if there's any other shows, docu-series, anything like that you would like to hear us talk about, also, like she said, you can leave a comment for us and let us know. And in the meantime, we hope that you're all staying safe, doing well, that you're happy and healthy, and we hope that you manifest everything you desire out of life.
Yes, amen. If you or anyone you know is a victim of rape, sexual assault, or abuse, please reach out to your local police department or a crisis hotline for support.